My name is Emily Gritzmacher. I'm from Portland, Oregon, and a junior ethnic studies major at the University of Oregon. And as Madeline McCain talked about, I was one of the students who changed my major. All right. This is what cheap electricity looks like. Mountaintop removal at Kayenta Mine. A turkey vulture soaring above nothing but dead land. Navajos on oxygen tanks. Asthmatic. Only 10% of the locals are employed. This is Navajo Nation. Peabody, a tyrannical tenant. Walk 100 feet and you'll find grandmas in third world settings. Coal fires burning, blue lips not breathing, 45 years and counting. Coal mining and the pollution it emits, you see that in the background, this is Kayenta Mine, is one of many issues on Native American reservations, along with poverty and development. To bring awareness of these issues to others, I created a book about poetry about Native American life on the Hopi and Navajo reservations on the Colorado Plateau. Although I'm an outsider who is decidedly non-Indian, I hope to encourage resistance to practices that threaten Native American life. By informing others of the nature of poverty, mining, and development on the Hopi and Navajo reservations through my poetry. It's also my hope to increase respect of Native American culture and tribal sovereignty. So a little background about the Hopi and Navajo. The Hopi have lived on the Colorado Plateau and their ancestors have lived on the Colorado Plateau for nearly a millennium. They've survived in this arid climate through their close relationship to the land. Through their close relationship to the land through dry farming and other practices. So as you have already seen, this is a Hopi cornfield, and dry farming makes this possible. The Navajo have occupied the Colorado Plateau for about 600 years. In 1831, Native American tribes became domestic dependent nations under the United States Supreme Court case Cherokee Nation versus Georgia. The Indian Citizenship Act of 1924 automatically made Native Americans citizens of both the United States and the states they resided in, whether they wanted it or not. Despite their extensive history on the Colorado Plateau, the tribes like the Navajo and Hopi face crippling problems like poverty and exploitation of natural resources by mining companies. Coal mining. This is Black Mesa Mine, just 100 yards from the Benali's sheep corral on Navajo Nation land, and we went here on a field trip. In 1966, John Boyden, the Hopi tribal lawyer, brought a proposed coal lease for Black Mesa Mine before the tribal council, as Charles Wilkinson discusses in his book, Fire on the Plateau. Proceeds from the lease would be divided equally between the Hopi and Navajo tribes, from the Kayenta Mine and Black Mesa Mine. Little did the tribes know Boyden was on Peabody's payroll. So that wasn't cool. Wilkinson wrote, "This took place before environmental impact statements. There were no public hearings. Few people, Indian or non-Indian, in or out of government or business, knew about the transactions. Nothing on the record indicates that John Boyden ever provided the Hopi Tribal Council with any substantial analysis of the Peabody lease." Knowing about the health effects and environmental effects today, that's some pretty serious business. There was no mention of water either. The mines were far more harmful to the land and people than the tribes could have expected. So the Benali's own a sheep corral on Black Mesa. And although Norman Benali and the rest of the Black Mesa Water Coalition succeeded in seeing the coal mine, this one right here, shut down on December 31st of 2005, the Benalis and other families still suffer from the lasting effects of Black Mesa Coal Mine and the still functioning Kayenta Coal Mine. Fern Benali and her sister both have asthma from air pollution, and her sister has been hospitalized multiple times, even being helicoptered to the hospital, and arriving with blue lips, as I mentioned in my poem. Their land is no longer a safe place. A Native American woman named Minnie Mule's granddaughter told James Down, an anthropology professor, "Where they are mining now is my land. My father is buried there. His grave was torn up in strip mining. I never approved of anything in the agreement to mine this area. Before Black Mesa coal mine was shut down at the beginning of 2006, a coal slurry used 3 million gallons of water each day to carry coal to Mojave Generating Station in Laughlin, Nevada, via a 273-mile pipeline. 4,000 acres of water was extracted each year from Hopi land without being replaced. Of the 1966 mining lease with Peabody Energy, former Hopi tribal chairman and Black Mesa Trust founder Vernon Masayesba said, "Hopis have made a terrible mistake. We have sold our soul to this company." In the 2011 Kayenta mine permit renewal, the Office of Surface Mining Reclamation and Enforcement concluded no significant emissions increase would result from the renewal of Kayenta mine's permit for another 5 years. The office wrote, "Ambient impacts due to the total emissions from the complex during the permit renewal term are projected to be not only low, but actually insignificant in many locations throughout the resource area." The Benalis would disagree. And the findings are upset to them. Vern and her sister are two examples of how Kayenta mine's ambient emissions have been harmful. Even if their fields do not show outward effects from the mining while the mining leases are active, the Benalis told us their land will become infertile in the future from all of the chemicals, and it's already started. There's nothing they can do about it. Poverty is another problem on Native American reservations, as most people probably know. According to the U.S. Census, 44% of Navajo were unemployed, and 56% were below the poverty line in 2000. The median household income in Hopi in 2006 was approximately 50% of the Arizona household median income at $23,446. Many people still lack running water and electricity. Poverty manifests itself in other troubling ways on the Hopi and Navajo reservations, including obesity and other health problems. In a 2004 article titled "Beverage Consumption and Risk of Obesity Among Native Americans in Arizona," Wharton and Hampel wrote that while 10 to 15% of U.S. children are overweight, no small number, Native American children are overweight at significantly higher rates. 30.5% of girls, so nearly 1 in 3, and 26.8% of boys, more than 1 in 4, are overweight. A significant reason for obesity among Native American youth is the high consumption of soda and other sugary beverages. A study by Curler et al., albeit in 1989, although this data still holds up strong today, found soda to be a leading core food among 9 to 16-year-old Navajos. 71% of children reported they consumed it 3 to 5 times a week in a study Wharton and Hampel conducted. There needs to be education about the dangers of high-fat and high fructose corn syrup consumption on and near reservations to prevent obesity and related health problems like diabetes. It is important that Native Americans have sovereignty over their land and their bodies, and they are free from unhealthy soda and fast food industries which have hit all impoverished Americans hard. While Native Americans should have the ability to drink soda if they want to, they should also be aware of its unhealthy properties and have easy access to healthy food and beverages. So this is a collection of ads from just one edition of the Navajo Hopi Observer. I just took this photo last night, and it's always bothers me how many ads there are in it. And as you can see, while there's some healthy food, let's see, okay, onions. But there's a lot of red meat, and I don't think you can see it, but there's ads for soda too. So this, as Katie talked about, really this is what Native Americans eat now, and it kind of looks like what we eat, but like the gluten and all the carbs and sugar in their diet has led to obesity and other problems. So this is Soda Nation. Aluminum cans, balloon, plastic bags resting on dirt. They may be light, but they don't float. Even more so, skin and fat blooms and balloons from bodies and folds through clothes. The fat is heavier than plastic or aluminum. And maybe, just maybe, I wonder, those air bubbles from carbonated sugar in soda cans and plastic bottles slip down throats to expand bellies. The baby girl's cheeks are huge and cute. Baby fat, probably, hopefully. But how long before her tummy sticks out past her waistband? How long before she wears extra large and drinks Mountain Dew like water? I don't see any labels, but A&W and Coca-Cola sponsor this. The BIA, Peabody, and others too. And it always heavy. Development is another contentious issue on the Colorado Plateau, especially around the Grand Canyon, which is a sacred place to many people, whether you're Native American or not. So one type of development Navajo tribal leaders have considered to generate revenue is the highly contentious Grand Canyon Escalade project proposed at the confluence of the Little Colorado with the Colorado River. The Escalade project is a proposed $120 million resort with an aerial tramway, pushed by an outside developer, confluence partners, and some tribal leaders. The proposed tram would actually carry people from the rim to river. So we went here on our river trip, and the tram, like people would come right along here. It's unclear how far the proposal would advance out, however, because the National Park Service does not allow development within the Grand Canyon. Moreover, although all development around the canyon is controversial and gets environmentalists and others up in arms about environmental health and water issues, the Escalade is especially contentious because it's a sacred, the confluence is a sacred place for multiple tribes, including the Hopi, whose Sipapuni, or place of emergence, is just 7 miles away from where the resort would be built. The resort would reportedly create up to 2,000 jobs and bring in $50 to $90 million in revenue to the Navajo Nation every year. Most of the jobs would be at service level, but with an unemployment rate higher than 40%, it's difficult to turn down jobs of any kind. According to the U.S. Census, the 2003 fiscal year revenue for Navajo Nation was $137 million. 51% of the revenue came from mining, 32% from taxes, and 17% from tourism. So if it actually goes through, the Escalade project would greatly increase Navajo revenue from tourism. Despite the revenue the Escalade project would bring to Navajo Nation, many Navajo and canyon lovers alike oppose it. In a video the Navajo group Save the Confluence released, Leonard Sloan, a Navajo man on a motorcycle with a mini American flag, said, "There are things you cannot sacrifice, and this is one of them. Money-hungry people want to take it." Many people view the Escalade project as a rejection of Navajo culture and disrespect towards elders. Despite my personal opposition to the Escalade project, for I believe it would cheapen the Grand Canyon and the Colorado River, this is one of the most incredible places in the canyon. It's important to respect tribal sovereignty. And I love the National Park Service, but we need to remember Native Americans were here for hundreds, thousands of years before we were, and they have a claim to the land. And it's a human rights violation to simply reject a proposal to combat poverty without offering and supporting other ideas. We need to have a dialogue about tribal sovereignty in this country. So, this is Sovereign River. Autonomy and sovereignty are ideal in theory until the practice conflicts with hard policy. 1,000 years ago, their ancestors scaled cliffs, hunting and gathering food, living in a land Ives called the gates of hell. Flash forward a millennium, the age of Apple, the company, and the mobile phone in every country, and 56% of Navajos living in poverty. Tribal leaders want to build at the confluence of culture and environment. The canyon is sacred to many, whose voices should be heard at the table of Grand Canyon policy. In summary, I wrote a series of poems about issues on Native American reservations on the Colorado Plateau. to inspire people to find solutions to problems and increase respect for Native Americans. The poverty-related health problems such as obesity, mining, and contentious development, as well as tribal sovereignty, are all issues that need to be given the attention they deserve. Although the idea sparked my interest, I was initially wary of sharing my work with others for fear of offending or upsetting any Hopi or Navajo. I'm still a little nervous, but I hope this won't happen, for rather than just point out the struggles on the reservations, I want to help find solutions to these problems and end the silence surrounding these issues. In order to raise awareness of issues on the reservations, I intend to have at least one poem published in publications like the Western Regional Honors Council, Student-Run Scribandee, or even High Country News, an American West magazine. Native American life is not visible in any of our mainstream media, television, radio, magazines. By writing about Peabody Energy's socio-environmental effects on the Navajo and Hopi, in addition to other issues, I hope to inspire people to action. Beyond that, I hope my poetry about Native American life will challenge students of all ages to demand education about Indigenous people in our country. The ignorance about a significant portion of the United States population and the conditions they are allowed to suffer through must end. Every cultural group in the United States should be respected and celebrated. Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I'm just curious what impacted you the most of doing this research of the 3 threats that you talked about?
Yeah, it was definitely mining, because I had been in a drought of words for 2 years and I hadn't really been able to write any poetry or anything. And then we went to Hopi and Navajo Reservation and I saw those mines and I just started writing, and that kind of made me want to do this project. I can't believe the conditions that people are allowed to suffer through. It's unreal. So I want to inspire change.
Do you have a series of poetry, or you just read 3?
Yeah, I do. I have.
The whole book?
I don't have my book with me. It's in Bruce Aiken's studio already, but I have 12 poems in a book I created. So, and about other issues too. And I write about the skywalk, even res dogs. So the stray dogs on the reservations. I love dogs.
Where are you thinking you've got some ideas to publish in?
Yeah. Like the High Country News, which would be really neat, or Scribandee, but I'll probably look for other publications too. Wayne?
I think you could also publish in the Bowman's Quarterly Review. It's a quarterly magazine that is for Grand Canyon River guides. But I just have to say I was really impressed with the way that you could articulate a viewpoint opposite to your own in the presentation.
Thanks.
That was great.
Thank you. So if there are no more questions, we have Kyle Chardy next.
Alright, I know you guys are all getting hungry for lunch, which excitedly is after me. No, I don't have any elk poop to feed you like Nina, but I do got some fun times to come. So fasten those seatbelts, open those ears, get ready for an adventure. You might forget it, but hopefully not. I won't. On that note, hi, my name is Kyle Chardy, and I did my presentation on tracing water's fingerprint with stable water isotopes. That's a mouthful. Okay, so the planet we live on is primarily a closed system, meaning all the matter on our planet now is all there ever was and all there ever will be, including water. Therefore, the 1,385 million cubic kilometers of water we have now is all there will ever be available. Many people don't think of water as this limiting resource. After all, 71% of our planet is made up of water. But in actuality, if we look deeper at the issues, we see that it's a minuscule 1% of that water which is readily accessible and usable fresh water, 99% of which coming from groundwater sources. And yet, water is one of the most valuable resources we have. In Arizona alone, it accounts for 51% of the drinking water, is utilized in every facet of industry and irrigation, sustains streams and springs, and preserves wetland and riparian ecosystems. Water also takes a complicated pathway known as the hydrologic cycle, which starts with precipitation in the form of snowmelt or monsoonal rains or rainfall falling from the sky and going to the ground, where then it infiltrates below ground, traveling underground to re-emerge at bodies of water, where it can then be evaporated back into the atmosphere, recycling back through that cycle. Now, if we do not understand the dominant forces of our groundwater system and the hydrologic cycle, then we will not properly be able to manage our water resources. Springs are very valuable in this because they are the window into the world of groundwater. They allow us to see conditions of the groundwater such as age, origin, chemistry, and ecology from this surface. For that reason, by using deuterium and oxygen-18 to learn the origins, such as snowmelt and rainfall, and the processes, such as evaporation and runoff, of springs in this semi-arid region, will allow management to better allocate these water resources. So, now for a little doozy and deja vu. We'll take you back to high school chemistry, all of you guys' favorite time in life. I'm sure it was. It wasn't for me. Anyways, so we all remember that water is comprised 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. Every atom consisting of protons and neutrons on the inside with electrons on the outside. Well, the isotopes being a form of an element with the same number of protons, but a variable number of neutrons, which are used for water, are deuterium and oxygen-18. As we can see here, deuterium, being the isotope of hydrogen, has 1 additional neutron, and oxygen-18 having 2 additional neutrons. Obviously, since these have more neutrons, that's going to be added weight. So these have a higher mass, and therefore are heavier. So when we think of these springs or bodies of water, and evaporation is occurring, which do you think is more likely to be evaporated out of the water? The lighter hydrogen or its heavier isotope form?
Hydrogen.
Well, it's going to be the heavier isotope. Just like if I ask you to pick up a pebble compared to a boulder, you're a lot more likely to go pick up that pebble. It's going to be a lot easier. So the heavier one's going to be harder to remove. So then I'll give a couple of you a chance to redeem yourselves in this trivia quiz. I know, you didn't want any more quizzes. So, now this body of water which just had evaporation occurring is the source of water which just underwent evaporation have a higher concentration of the lighter standard form or the heavier isotope. The heavier isotope. You guys are all geniuses, you passed my class. Because we've already extracted an amount of the lighter one, so the ratio is now favoring the heavier isotope. You guys are geniuses. So, by evaluating stable water isotopes, we can then trace water's origins and movement. So, we can think of the isotopic ratios of water molecules as similar to our fingerprints. And just as a fingerprint has its distinct ridges which differentiate it from everyone else's, and we could then pin a suspect to a crime found at the scene by their unique fingerprint found there, we can trace a water source by its distinct isotopic ratio. Its ratio of the isotopes of oxygen-18 and deuterium, or hydrogen-2. For example, water sources such as, well, we will wait on that. Water sources such as recharge like monsoons and snowmelt. Certain springs are recharged by one, whereas some can be recharged by others. And we can identify which springs are recharged by different sources so as then to know the recharge source of the spring and how to better manage that resource. So this data all came about it was formally released in 1961 when Harmon Craig produced the Global Meteoric Waterline in his publication. Meteoric waters being sources of groundwater that originate in the atmosphere and reach aquifers through precipitation. He showed that there's a linear relationship, known as the global meteoric waterline, between deuterium and oxygen-18 concentrations in natural meteoric waters. This supports the idea that we can map out the derivation and pathways of our water sources by using these isotopes. So again, we can think of these almost as fingerprints, that where our data is going to fall along our global meteoric waterline is then going to relate to the source of the spring and tell us things about it. For example, we said with the higher isotopic ratio, it's then going to relate to evaporation. So data points falling to this region are going to relate to a source which underwent a lot of evaporation. And as we decrease in that heavier concentration, we get areas such as monsoonal rains and snowmelt. Okay. So, for a more accurate picture, this is the actual global meteoric waterline, showing some of what we were stating. And this is the expression which relates to it. So, it's becoming more and more important to assess things like this with climate change altering our hydrologic cycle, the perpetual over-urbanization of areas necessitating increased amounts of groundwater, and invasive flora and fauna expending the already limited resources in struggling ecosystems. Stable water isotope analyses can help us address these issues as well as curtail future issues potentially. So, in my research, I worked with and assisted Kyle Paffett, graduate hydrology student here at NAU, in collecting water samples from 200 spring sites around this area, and in collecting a stable water isotope ratio, as well as things like temperature, pH, elevation, and dissolved oxygen concentration. While collecting samples, it's important to follow certain procedures, such as collecting it at the emergence point, so as not to have atmospheric interferences, interactions interfere, and to follow proper procedures when collecting the water sample. Samples are then taken to the laboratory where they're analyzed, and then they use the results to then be plugged into an equation to find the actual isotopic concentration. One of these beautiful looking, not intimidating equations. It's not that bad when you play with it actually. So this is an example for our oxygen-18 one. So we would take the results from the lab and plug it in and then get our ratio for oxygen-18. So we can think of these distinct ridges like, I'm sorry, that was a flashback. So, keeping you guys with the seatbelts in. Alright, so stable water isotopes can give us an insight into the quality, composition, and origins of our groundwater sources. It's important to understand these things when we assess environmental conditions, especially in this semi-arid southwest region, where factors such as aridity and evaporation, temperature, and elevation play a crucial role in shaping the environmental issues of the region. That's why so we already have our global meteoric waterline, but we can then create local meteoric waterlines, which are more accurate to your specific region, which can help you manage and make more informed decisions for your region. So by doing this, we could prevent springs from drying up and water shortages, alleviate endemic species stresses, as well as understand climate and condition effects that on groundwater and spring sources. So in the research that I was assisting in, springs within the Kaibab National Forest and the Coconino National Forest were assessed. So we see the red line being that global meteoric waterline, while as the blue dots relate to the isotopic ratios. As we can see, if we were to create a local meteoric waterline for this data, it would be falling with a lower slope or average rate of change than this one here, affected largely by, remember, this region related to things such as evaporation. And then some of these could be more of our derived from monsoonal rains and snowmelt. So we're seeing how this is not the same as the results for the global meteoric waterline, and therefore it should be managed differently and have policies that properly reflect the differences in this region. Stable water isotopes are also a function of temperature. So another property is that as temperature decreases or we rise in elevation, then the isotopic ratio is going to become more negative. This will result in a shift down and to the left for the data point. And notice the highest elevation site, the northern Kaibab, is the most negative isotopic ratio area. So we're seeing that that relationship applies here. And then conversely, as we increase temperature or go to lower elevations, we're seeing that incremental stepping stone of going up and to the right with more positive isotopic ratio values. This allows us to look at it from a different angle and see how these local factors are attributing to our water processes here. So one way how this can benefit the Flagstaff area is with the recent 4FRI, which is the Forest Restoration Initiative, in which they're trying to restore ponderosa forests to natural ecosystems. This is done by thinning out forests so as to prevent things such as crown fires and make a healthier ecosystem. It's happening in 4 natural forests, which are the Coconino, the Kaibab, the Apache, and the Tonto. Forests play an integral part in the health and sustainability of watersheds and in regulating recharge and runoff to aquifers and streams. And within forests, although riparian ecosystems only account for 1% of the area, they contribute a much larger amount of biodiversity to the region. So, by using stable water isotope analyses, we can better benefit these riparian ecosystems, as well as help the vast biodiversity of these regions. I fear that if these studies are not conducted, a similar situation could occur as that which occurred with the Beaver Creek watershed studies, which took place from the 1950s until late 1980s, in which they were thinning ponderosa forests and removing pinyon juniper, so as to monitor surface water and sedimentary yields. This produced positive results for the first 6 years, and then no more positive results after that. This was because the amount and temperature of precipitation ended up playing a larger cumulative effect in the availability of water than the thinning of the forests. So if we can build off these past lessons and implement stable water isotope research for the 4FRI initiative, it will be giving us valuable insight into how it can help the ecosystems in here, as well as give us a more holistic representation of the benefits attained and elongate these positive impacts. So, in conclusion, according to the US Census, last month alone, the US population increased by over 6 million people. That's 6 million more mouths to feed. 6 million more carbon footprints trampling our already parched springs. In the coming years, we're going to come to see that water issues will be accentuated into all of our issues at hand. And by using stable water isotopes, we can learn much about the underground flow patterns of water, which will better help us manage this jeweled resource around the whole world, and more specifically in this jeweled region as the Colorado Plateau. Thank you very much. Questions? Ask, please. Katie.
So when you were showing us that with increased elevation and decreased temperature that the plot becomes more negative, the graph had negative numbers. So could you put it like on a full coordinate with all the different places, and there would be stuff like down in this quadrant as well as like points up here?
Well, you have to fit the axes to the isotopic ratios which you're receiving once it's out of the lab and from the equation.
Mm-hmm.
So normally a lot of the data points are falling in negative regions, so we wouldn't do a standard Cartesian system where it's like a -10 to 10, -10 to 10. So you kind of fit your axes to accommodate to the data values you receive.
Okay, but if you were doing it for multiple regions, like cross-region analysis, stuff that was kind of Sonoran Desert versus like top of Mount Humphreys, could you combine those on one plot and it would span different quadrants?
It would span a lot more because as we're changing our temperature and elevation, it's shifting the isotopic ratio, and then the data point is either, as we mentioned, going to be down and to the left at those lower temperature, higher elevations, or up and to the right at the higher temperature, lower elevations. So yes, it would be a much more spread out dispersion, I believe.
Put your graph up.
Yeah, it should be like 14 or 15. Right about next one. So yeah, even here, because we have sites high up in elevation, and then some of these could be potentially outliers because they're somewhat strange. But even just these large differences here related to as we all know, living in Flagstaff, it's way up in elevation, but we're still in Arizona where it's a very arid climate and very hot. So by the diversity within Arizona, that's somewhat showing here as well. And we would see more as that continued. Emily?
I don't speak chemistry, so I can't ask a cool question about the nitty-gritty of science in your project, but what was the best part of this research project for you?
For me, it was really just being able to, I've learned a lot about and come to really see that I'd like to work with preserving water resources in the future, but I really just had this vague image and intangible understanding of how that actually occurs, and I really feel like with a lot of help from Kyle and Angie and other people, I gradually yet steadily created this bridge from just understanding what you could read in a textbook and someone explaining to you, to going out in the field and collecting research, seeing how that results are then analyzed, and then what that actually means and how it can be related to something. And that was just really valuable for me to actually finally get that full circle. Yes?
So are you sending this research, or is Kyle sending this research? Is it going beyond here?
Well, you could also ask him, he's right behind you.
Okay. Well, where are you going to send that?
Yes, this is actually going to be presented to the Forest Service. I'm not sure how much further it's going to go. But really, it's really good baseline data for the full ride restoration. Hopefully, after the restoration, we'll see how.
So that represents study be like 2 years down the road, or a year down the road?
Probably 5. I think that's the time frame of the restorations. It's kind of spread out.
Anything else?
So it looks like the buffet is not all the way set up because we wouldn't have heard anything like Kyle was saying. But so feel free to take 10-15-minute walk. You're all invited for lunch. There's plenty. You're welcome to call a few friends if you'd like. I think we get food for 35. So we have an hour and 40 minutes for lunch. So please help yourself.